My client only had one rule. My partner broke it and became their new nest. He had one rule, just one. Don't eat the ants. That's what he told us, standing in the doorway of his own home, looking less like the owner and more like a hostage. He was a kid, maybe early 20s, with skin so pale it was almost blue under the porch light. His glasses were thick, smudged, and behind them his eyes were wide and wet. He wasn't just serious, he was terrified. He said it again, his voice a dry whisper that barely carried over the sound. The sound was the first thing that really got to you. A constant, soft, grinding crunch, like walking on a carpet of crushed eggshells. He stared at my partner Ren, then at me, a long, pleading look. Then he just turned and walked away down the street, disappearing into the evening gloom, leaving us with the key and his one bizarre instruction. Ren just laughed it off. $5 says he's got a meth lab in the basement. Ren was the kind of guy who saw every warning as a dare. He'd once licked a bus station floor for a crumpled $10 bill. He didn't even need the money, he just loved the story it gave him. I pushed the door open and the smell hit us. It was overwhelming, but not bad. Not at all. It was intensely sweet, like a bakery fire. Melted sugar, warm bread, and something else. Something rich and almost floral. It was the kind of smell that made your mouth water before your brain could even process what it was. And then, we saw it. The source of the sound. The floor, the walls, the ceiling. They were all moving. A shimmering black and red river of bodies. It wasn't an infestation, it was an occupation. The carpet was a living tapestry of ants, so thick that the original color was a complete mystery. Every step we took produced that sickening, brittle crunch. Thousands of tiny bodies popping under the soles of our boots. I felt a phantom itch crawl up my spine. I got to work, laying down a perimeter of diatomaceous earth, the fine white powder a stark border against the heaving tide of insects. Ren, of course, went exploring. Kalen, his voice echoed from a back room. "You gotta get in here, man." "Holy," I ignored him. Ren's threshold for amazement was notoriously low. He once called me over to admire a perfectly spherical meatball he'd found in his spaghetti. But then he called again, his voice tight, different. "Dude, I'm not kidding here now." I sighed, shaking the dust from my gloves, and followed the sound of his voice into the master bedroom. And I saw why he'd called. In the far corner, the seething carpet of ants rose up into a mound. It was a pyramid of glistening white specks, each the size of a grain of rice, stacked meticulously into a pile that reached my waist. It looked like a giant heap of spilled quinoa, and it was pulsing. A low, rhythmic, unified throb. Worker ants scurried over its surface, adding new eggs, reinforcing its structure. It was an anthill built indoors, built of its own young. The sweet bakery smell was thickest here. It coated the back of my throat. Enthroned at the very peak was the queen. She was a monster. As long and thick as my thumb, her abdomen a swollen, translucent sack of dark fluid, pulsating in time with the mound beneath her. Her armored head swiveled, and her pincers clicked together with an audible snap, snap, snap. I felt my stomach turn. "We're bombing this. Now." "Hold up," Ren said, a familiar, reckless glint in his eyes. He pointed at the pile. "Dare me to eat one." I just stared at him. "What?" He shrugged, a grin spreading across his face. "Eggs ain't ants. It's a loophole. You're an idiot, Ren. $20. This is how you get some kind of parasitic worm. 15. No. Ren's grin widened. He stepped toward the pile and plucked a single fat egg from the base. As he did, a ripple went through the mound. The queen on top let out a high-pitched chitter and lunged. It was impossibly fast. She scuttled down the pile and latched onto the back of Wren's hand before he could even react. He screamed, a short, sharp yelp of pain and surprise, and shook his hand violently. The Queen held on, her legs scrabbling, her pincers digging deep. He finally managed to fling her against the wall, where she lay stunned for a second before he brought his boot down on her with a wet crunch. A smear of purple-black fluid stained the drywall. Wren stuck his bleeding hand in his mouth, sucking on the puncture wounds. His eyes were watering. "Little bastard," he mumbled around his thumb. "Just drop it, Wren. Let's finish the job." "No way," he said, pulling his thumb out. He still held the egg in his other hand. It was pearlescent, shining in the dim light from the hallway. I could have sworn I saw something dark move inside it. He held it up over his open mouth, a mock sacrament. For a second I thought about stopping him, about tackling him and knocking that thing out of his hand. But a part of me, the part that had grown tired of his stupid dares and his need for attention, just wanted him to learn. Some lessons have to be learned the hard way. He let it drop. He didn't chew. He just grimaced, his throat working as he forced it down. He swallowed hard, then stuck his tongue out, a proud, childish gesture. "Done. Now, where's my money?" "You owe me for lunch last week," I said, turning away. "We're even." He started to argue, but I was already walking out. We finished the job in silence, fogged the place until the air was thick with chemicals, and left. The whole drive back, I could smell that cloying, sweet scent coming off of Wren in waves. I didn't see him all weekend. That wasn't unusual. He'd hole up, play video games, and emerge on Monday morning looking like death warmed over. When I knocked on his door at 7 a.m., he was later than usual. It took him a solid 10 minutes to answer. When the door finally cracked open, I barely recognized him. It was more than a hangover. His face was puffy and pale, with a waxy, translucent quantity like stretched paraffin. His eyes were sunk into dark, bruised-looking pits. A sheen of sweat covered his skin, but it looked thick, syrupy. He was holding his stomach, which seemed distended, bloated like he'd swallowed a small melon. And the smell. Under the usual Monday morning stench of stale beer and unwashed clothes, it was there. That same smell from the house. Sugary. Pervasive. Can't work today, man," he groaned, leaning his whole weight against the doorframe. I told him not to worry about it, to get some rest. I'd seen him fake sick before, but this was a masterclass in misery. I figured it was just the flu from hell. I'd completely forgotten about the egg. He called me that Friday. Said he had a bit of a bug problem and was too sick to deal with it. I was getting worried. I stopped and picked up some soup and stomach medicine on the way over. He didn't even answer the door this time. I used the spare key he kept under a loose brick. The moment I stepped inside, the sweetness hit me like a physical blow. It was so thick, it was almost suffocating. I had to pull my shirt up over my nose just to breathe. I found him in his bedroom. He was lying on his back, moaning, clutching his now significantly larger stomach. His entire body was coated in that same clear, viscous fluid, soaking his clothes and sheets, making them stick to his skin. And his skin, there were angry red sores on his neck and arms. They looked like burst blisters, but they weren't weeping pus. They were weeping that same sweet, syrupy liquid. He waved away the soup I offered. Not hungry. His voice was a strained whisper. Ants were crawling on his wall. A single, perfectly straight line of them marched from a crack near the window down to the floor and disappeared under his bed. "You never get ants," I said, looking at the disciplined trail. Wren just groaned. I set up some traps, sprayed around the baseboards, and told him I'd check on him later. I should have dragged him to a hospital. I should have done a lot of things. That night, my phone buzzed twice. 1:17 a.m. and 2:04 a.m. I slept through both. When I woke up the next morning and saw the missed calls from Wren, I felt a knot of dread tighten in my gut. I listened to the first voicemail. It was just him, groaning, asking if I could drive him to an urgent care clinic because he didn't want to pay for a ride. Classic Ren. I almost deleted the second one, but I hit play. The sound that came through the speaker made every hair on my body stand on end. It was Ren screaming, but it was a wet, garbled sound, like he was drowning. His words were shredded, torn apart by a sound I couldn't identify, a dry, chittering, rustling static that sounded like a million tiny pieces of paper being crumpled at once. Through the static and the screams, I could make out a few words repeated over and over. It's Thien. Me. I'm Ants. I'm Ants. Then the line went dead. I didn't even bother to put on shoes. I was in my car and breaking every speed limit to get to his apartment. When I got there, it was quiet. No screaming. Just a faint rustling from behind the door, like sand pouring slowly onto a wooden floor. I used the key, my hand shaking so badly it took 3 tries to get it in the lock. I pushed the door open. The smell rolled out, a tidal wave of superheated sugar. And the sight, his apartment was the house, but 1,000 times worse. The very air seemed to vibrate with movement. A living, breathing layer of black covered every conceivable surface. They cascaded from the ceiling in thick, crusty streams. My bare feet stepped onto the carpet and were instantly covered, the crunching sound deafeningly loud in the silence. Ren? My voice was a croak. I waded through the living tide toward his bedroom, slapping ants from my arms, feeling their tiny legs skittering across my skin. I reached the doorway. I looked inside. And the soup I'd bought him came roaring back up my throat. He was on the bed, or what was left of him. His body was twisted into an unnatural shape, limbs bent at impossible angles. His eyes were wide open, staring blankly at the ceiling, his jaw slack. His skin, where I could see it, was shredded. Long, ragged tears ran the length of his arms and torso. His ribcage was exposed, the organs within slick and dark. But that wasn't what made me sick. It wasn't the blood or the gore. It was the movement. His entire body was a hive. From the gashes in his flesh, endless columns of ants were pouring out, a disciplined, organized army emerging from their conquered territory. They were carrying away pieces of him, tiny red scraps of muscle, glistening bits of fat in their mandibles. They crawled in and out of his eye sockets, his nostrils, his open mouth. His flesh was furrowed with tunnels, his body a grotesque, living ant farm. My eyes were drawn, against my will, to his stomach. It had been ripped open from the inside, the skin peeled back like a gruesome flower. And in the hollowed-out cavity of his abdomen, where his intestines should have been, was a pile. A waist-high mound of glistening white eggs. And at its peak, clicking its pincers in the silence, sat a new queen, her abdomen swollen and pulsing. I stood there for a long time, unable to move, unable to breathe. My mind was just a blank wall of static. And then, a strange thing happened. The smell, it changed. It was no longer just sweet. It was appetizing. My stomach, empty from vomiting, let out a loud gurgle. I was hungry. Starving. Starving. My mouth began to water as I stared at the eggs, shimmering and coated in Ren's vital fluids. I wondered what they would taste like. I took a step into the room, then another. My hand lifted, reaching for the pile. And then something on the wall opposite the bed shifted. A chaotic swarm of ants broke from the main mass and began to move. They coalesced, forming shapes, then letters. They spelled out a message, written in their own living bodies. Don't eat. The ants. My mind snapped back into focus. The hunger vanished, replaced by a wave of pure, cold terror. I jammed my fingers into my nostrils, blocking the scent, and I ran. I scrambled out of the room, out of the apartment, ants raining down on me, a few slipping past my lips. They tasted like brown sugar and butter. I almost swallowed. I spat violently, clawing at my tongue to scrape away the gritty remnants of their bodies. I burst out into the morning light, stripping off my clothes on the lawn, not caring who saw me. I threw them in a dumpster and lit them on fire. Huddled in my car, I finally called the authorities. I never once unplugged my nose. Life eventually goes on. I couldn't quit my job. Killing bugs is the only thing I know how to do. I just don't take ant jobs anymore. But things aren't quite normal. Sometimes, when I'm in my apartment late at night, I think I catch a whiff of it. That sweet, warm smell. It never lasts long, but when it's there, I find myself taking deep, long breaths. It's almost comforting. But last night, I saw a line of ants coming in through a crack in my bedroom window. They were marching in a perfect double file line across my floor. I watched them for a while, and the only thought in my head was how very, very hungry I was.